Hello and welcome to the Cardiff Central podcast with me, Karen Harris and Harley. As always, how are you doing, Harley? Well, it sort of shows that I'm doing the intro that you're not feeling too well, is it?
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, I said started my new job last week, and so first weekend back home because I've been having to stay with my parents for the short term. And I got ill on the Saturday night. I'm sure it had nothing to do with that Cardiff performance, but the timing was not well. And yeah, so I've sort of been trying to build myself, get back up soon. Had a horrific cough, blocked nose and stuff. So
Yeah, we sort of discussed maybe not mentioning the Cardiff performance of the weekend, but you've managed to mention it within the first 30 seconds to a minute. We'll come back to it. There's so much news going around. Obviously, yesterday was a bit of a, chaotic day. Did you see any of that news coming at all?
no, I mean some of the players called up. I thought it was probably going to be them because no one else, but I mean, like the Zamet news was so left field. It's like, where?
Yeah, I've said on a couple of things that there was a rumor going around, and I'd heard it, but I'd made the assumption. And here we go, journalists making assumptions. It's always a dangerous task, but made the assumption that it wasn't going to be at the age of 22. I thought it might be 26, maybe 28. Sort of later in his rugby career. But no, he's gone early, which I can understand why, and obviously can come back, but. Yeah, obviously a big loss for Welsh rugby, but it's probably as the Cardiff pod to focus on the positive aspects of that squad, which were 11 Cardiff players. And you mentioned there were a few surprises in there. Mackenzie Martin and Evan Lloyd are probably two of the biggest ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not to say that they haven't been great when they've had their opportunities for Cardiff, but I feel like Big Mac probably needed a little bit more time. Maybe could have done with another. I'm not sure if he is eligible for under 20s still this season, or if he wouldn't be, or if he's just past the threshold. But I thought another development cycle for him would have been better. And you don't want to be throwing him into like the full senior game whilst he's still developing. But even if he doesn't get on the pitch, being in training camp with Gatland and stuff, he's going to come back and he's going to know exactly what he did. If you think about how much the likes of Azarati and Donachowski and Teddy have improved just from like short times in the Wales camp, it could only do good for him, and it will let him know exactly where he needs to be, or
Yeah.
where Gatland sees him. I said Evan Lloyd for me. I've had a bit of time to think about it. It was really out of the blue, but for me, I feel like it's probably because he's. I wouldn't say he's anywhere near at Derry Lake's level yet, but there's an awful lot of similarities between the two. That they're both converted eight, so that they're quite good ball carrying. They're very physical players. Um, I mean, his lineout, what little lineouts work he's had because he's only really had a few minutes off the bench here and there has been all right. So I mean, I think most of us thought if it was going to be any of the Cardiff hookers, it was going to be Belcher because of the form he was playing, or maybe even Evan Daniel. I think Evan Lloyd is that much of a surprise. Everyone thinks Evan Daniel is the one who's been called up.
Yeah, that is my bugbear recently, is the amount of people thinking that Evan Daniel's been called up, not Evan Lloyd. Yeah, it is the converted eight Evan Lloyd. And you mentioned that about his converted eight. He's clearly got an added athleticism there. You see him whenever he comes onto the pitch, he does offer um, extremely good line speed in defence. That's one of the things I've noticed. He does bring energy. There's that clip where Ellis Jenkins is talking to him saying, "Oh, it's really good energy. Just channel it in this, that, and other way." And that's the bit where he needs to develop. It is a developing squad and a young squad. Everyone's talked about it being an average age of 25, and that's probably why Belcher's missed out. Someone like
Mm.
Belcher, someone like Sam Parry perhaps missed out because he's looking for young guns who are going to take up the mantle in the future. Evan Lloyd is definitely one of those. I spoke to Griff Rees at the start of the season, and he was really excited about Evan Lloyd and name checked him as one of the players to look out for. Um, I've made no bones about it. I'm a big fan of Evan Daniel as well, but Lloyd gets the nod this time. They must have seen something in him that they thought, we're going to take a punt on him. And yeah, I think he's got a lot to learn. I still do, and I don't. He'll probably know that. Everyone will probably know that. Line out being number one of that. Any converted hooker has a lot of line-out work to do. You see, Dewi Lake is still learning that trade, even though he's played internationally, captained his country. So Evan's going to have to work on it in the coming weeks and coming months, and hopefully he gets his opportunity. But yeah, as I say, one of 11 Cardiff players. I'll just run that through that. So you've got a full front row: Domachowski, Lloyd, Azarati. Then in the second row, Teddy got in. Well, unsurprisingly for both of us, considering his form. Alex Mann, Mackenzie Martin, and Jim Botham in the back row. So you have 7 of the pack, which is brilliant going. Then Thomas. I'm always scared I'm going to forget someone, but Thomas, Josh Adams, and Cam Winnett, along with Mason Grady, of course, who's that. I don't think you could be surprised at many of those. Cam, obviously, four to win their first caps. What does that say about Cardiff's young guns and how it's been developed? They've been getting a lot of praise on social media in the last few days, isn't it? The academy and Cardiff Rugby.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially what you're saying about wanting, because in Gatland's presser, he was saying about how he wants a younger, more, he wants a dynamic, athletic pack, which is what most Cardiff forwards offer. They tend to be more athletic and dynamic. It does cause problems in other areas, but I'm guessing Gatland thinks he can help them get away with that at the international game. I mean, you do tend to have fewer scrums and things like that. Interestingly as well, of the 5 new caps, 4 of them are forwards, which so I think this is quite unheard of for Gatland to have that many new caps in their squad anyway, particularly up front. I know we basically named a full 7 of an 8 in the pack. I'll be very surprised if we see that all 7 of those out in one go. During this, I think Teddy's probably going to get either some bench time. It's going to be maybe in the middle or the end of the Six Nations. I think the second rows wise, it is probably going to be a rotation of Beard, Rowlands, and new captain Jenkins. Which congratulations to him on that, because that's a hell of an achievement to be captain in your country at 21, second ever after the great Gareth Edwards. So just bring back to Cardiff.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one with Teddy in second row, because obviously with Will, there's only 4 second rows. Will Rowlands being one of them, obviously based out in France. Dav Jenks, another one based out in England. So they're going to get limited training time, especially in those fallow weeks and in those run up to the first game. So, Dav Jenkins, you'd expect him to start. Does Dav Jenkins and Will Rowlands work as a partnership? Does Dav Jenkins and Adam Beard, I should say, work as a partnership? That's a question I'd have. Are they too similar? So therefore, do you bring in a Teddy and a Will Rowlands to partner David Jenkins? I do think Teddy's got a chance, and that's a chance to start. It's difficult with the form of Beard has been superb, and obviously Will Rowlands has been brilliant for, well, years for Wales, isn't he? So it'd be a difficult one to get into. But following about 15 years of Alan Wynne-Jones and someone else, the second rows is now probably our strongest position.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, another thing I've seen. So Hugh Griffin from Scarlett or Catboy, as he's apparently being nicknamed now. It's he's been positing the idea that Gatland might see Teddy more as a 6 option, and having that hybrid lock role. I've seen other people say it. I'm not too fussed on it. I think then you're starting to go down. Is he just going to treat him like this generation Seb, where he got mucked about for positions so much that he never really mastered any of them, to where he probably could have played when he was at his full potential. Who partners who, I think, is quite interesting, because I think it'll depend on who he wants calling line next, because that's traditionally Beard's role, but David Jenkins himself is a competent line-out caller. Do you want your line-out caller and your captain being the same person? That adds some other complications to it. So it could be, there are other things Gatland said, that he's trying to ease Jenkins up to be a starter, but for me, if you're calling him captain, you really should be looking to start him. Otherwise, do the co-captains thing, and maybe he comes off the bench and takes over the captaincy then. Teddy's worked really hard for it. I think he's, from last season, he's improved so much, and he was already pretty decent last season. I'd say other than James Fender, probably the form form lock in Wales.
Yeah, completely agree. Sorry, I got distracted by our Twitter because we had a like by on one of our posts by a very famous individual. A new Wales cap, Alex Mann, has just liked one of our tweets, which is quite exciting, which was reflecting a really exciting week, not just for him, but also for Cardiff fans, seeing him and Cam Winnett signing new contracts. Alex has almost done provided the link for me himself. But how important is it to see these two sign new contracts? You know, there's a cynical view of it, which is it's just before they get they get their Wales cap, so therefore financially it's probably a better deal for Cardiff. But it's also a really important thing to nail these players down for long term and try and get them. Well, they are the future of Cardiff, aren't they? And the future of Welsh rugby, even the present of Welsh rugby, by the looks of things.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, think about it. It was only a couple of weeks ago when we, well, last week when we had Thomas Williams go and we were saying, oh, we're going to lose. We've got this brilliant team that's almost ready to break, to gel and mix, and they're all going to go. And now we're seeing the players we want to retain stay. We've got with Cam Winnett signed, Alex Mann signed. It sounds like Mason Grady is leaning more towards staying at Cardiff.
Yeah,
well, he's probably seen it as even if he takes, doesn't get what he's earned in this time, he can rack up his Wales caps and then go get his next contract on big money or whatever. Maybe he just doesn't want to, leave home. It's you might enjoy where he is. My mum knows his mum, so apparently she's threatened to go around his house and tell him what for if he doesn't sign for Cardiff anyway. I can't wait to get in trouble for that when she listens to this.
I will say that doesn't always work. A friend of mine's lives not far from Seb and is a big Scarlets fan. Despite all of us going to Glanthav, and he bumped into Seb in a pub once and said, "You should sign for Scarlets, 100% sign for Scarlets." Obviously, thankfully, it didn't happen from a Cardiff perspective, but it doesn't always work that way. I think players have their own minds.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, it's don't leave the wonderful Wales or go too far west. It's they're two very different conversations. Yeah, I mean, we mentioned Alex Mann signing. It's so good to see him getting rewarded for his form. I think he's been unbelievable for Cardiff. Saw some pretty crappy comments about him not being physical enough. I think that's bollocks. You can't have a go at your six when a whole pack gets dismantled. That's not, you can't put that on one player.
Who's the top tackler in the URC?
Yeah, he's a top tackler in the URC, and it's not like he's only just about holding on to these tackles. It's not the sort of tackle I make at six, where I grab on the legs and just get them down any way possible. He's putting in shots, and his reads are very good, and he will do that for 80 minutes, and it will be the same intensity at the start and the finish.
Mm.
He's a line-out option, which is always a bonus for a team with a wobbly line-out. The more people you can throw to, the more chance you have of getting one of them, because it at least keeps the opposition guessing. And he is incredibly athletic, despite being able to size people down in the old sort of Dan Lydiate style. And it is something I've been saying Wales have been crying out for ages, is someone who can just get the bugger down on the floor. Because especially with the preference of referees to reward the attack, to steal the ball in defence, you've got to have everything going right for you. That person's got to drop down quick, and you've got to be on the ball even faster. It's got to be that clean that having someone who will just chop and chop and chop and chop all game long is an asset.
Yeah, and we've got two of the best Jackling sevens in British rugby at the moment in Rafael and Jack Morgan. Obviously Morgan's injured at the moment, but they are two of the best at that style. So you chop them down, you get it's very simplistic to say bring back Lydiate Warburton-esque style, but that is what we're talking about, really, isn't it? It's that chop them down and then pilfer the ball over the top. I think Mann is got a good chance to start. I think that six is an interesting one. I've also thought he may go with a Teddy or a Dav Jenks. I don't particularly want to see that, but I do see that as a possibility. Do you think six is almost well, bar that option. Apart from that, it's almost a straight shootout between Jim Botham and Alex Mann, or even Mackenzie Martin, and move Wainwright to 6. Or do you see it slightly differently with anyone else?
So I think at the moment, the way I reckon, for when we play that first game at home, the way I see this back row going is we're going to it's going to be either both of them or Wainwright at 6 and the other one at 8.
Mm.
Probably both them 6, Wainwright 8, because I think Gatlin really likes Wainwright at 8 at the moment, and then we'll
Yeah,
have Rafael at 7. Even if he
yeah,
hasn't been in all the camps, he's
yeah.
probably the best out at 7 in that squad at the moment.
Yes.
I've made my feelings clear. I can see why both of them, still an open side, but I do love him at 8. I think he's a fantastic 8-6 option more than that. And then I'd probably be looking at Basham on the bench, although to be honest, given his not great form and the fact he's struggling to get into the Dragons at the moment for whatever reasons, I'm sure the Dragons Lair podcast will share their reasons, so there's an excuse to go listen to them. I think then you might see a man like Alex Mann or Mackenzie Martin come onto the bench. But I said it's probably going to be those 4 more experienced players first, and then you'll see the other 2 bleed in. They might get a start again, maybe in one of the latter weeks. But
Maybe.
then it depends how Gatlin's thinking. I mean, I could be completely wrong and he goes completely experimental to go away to Dublin.
Mm.
Wouldn't be the first time he's done it. But I think one thing I would say is don't expect us to come away with a Grand Slam this season. This is clearly a squad, and Gatlin said this is going to be a painful season because it's about finding out who I can work with and getting people into the system. So, a bit like Shower at the start of the season, lower your expectations.
Yeah, but you say that, but there's something exciting about Sherritt saying that, and then you've got 4 players in Mann, Martin, Lloyd, and Winnett who weren't regular starters last season, who are now, especially in Mann and Winnett's case, everyone was calling for them to be in the squad because of their form, because of their performances week in, week out. Personally, I think I'd start Mann, and that's nothing against both of them. I'm a big fan of him. I just think Mann is more of a. I also don't see Mann as an impact player as well. That would be my second
Yeah,
point. I think he's a guy who churns out just consistent performances, chops players down, chops players down, chops them. And then if you need to change it in the final 20, you change it in the final 20. But he's so consistently superb. And I'm not just saying that because he's like that tweet, but he is consistent. And I really do enjoy watching him perform. So yeah, I hope he gets his opportunity sooner rather than later because I think he fully deserves it. Likewise, Cam. I think that's an interesting one now, especially with Lewis Usamet. It almost it does. It removes an option of fullback there, doesn't it? You're left then with the versatility of a Kai Evans or Johan Lloyd plus a Josh Adams. I think if you play Josh Adams at fullback, you're getting 2 Cardiff players in that back 3 because Grady goes on the wing and Rio Dyer is the other winger, obviously. Or you play Cam Winnett at fullback. So I think the likelihood is there's two Cardiff players in the starting back 3 for Wales, which is well, I think it's a good thing. I know. Well, we'll come. I don't know if we want to talk about uh, fan questions or listener questions, but one of the questions was, should we be positive about having so many players in the squad? And I think 100% yes, because what does it display? It just shows that the pathway is working, and it has worked. And Griff Rhys and Matt Sherritt, as they've had a lot of praise this week, deserve a lot of praise for what they've done with the youth setup and bringing players through. I don't know if Harley feels differently, but that's how I see it.
yeah, absolutely. It shows that we're holding up our side of the pro rugby agreement. We're developing players for Team Wales, which is ultimately what the WRU wants from the regions. Yes, they want us. Well, they do. We'll go into the more like nitty gritty and conspiratorial stuff another time maybe. But basically, what the WRU want is a production line of talent for the international game, which fuels everything else, pretty much, because that's where most of the money comes from. So having 11 players in the squad shows we're doing that. It's now on the WRU and the and like the money men behind Cardiff to keep these players in the region, is to keep them at Cardiff, and that's on them now. Sherratt and Griffiths have done their job. They have got international quality players to play. What we need now is to keep them here and to get the next, and to keep fueling this factory, and then picking the right people to supplement that, and then maybe when it's time for some players to move on, they move on. As much as I want Thomas to stay here forever, we've got an Ellis Bevan, we've got a Jamie Hill, and then we've got another academy lad who's already showing good signs. So we can afford to lose a Thomas because we've got, again, because they're doing their job, we've got the backups in place. So yeah, I think we should just be happy. I think we should be really happy. I'll be less happy when we get to the end of the Six Nations and they're all injured. But that'll be a pod for a moment then. At the moment, I'm happy because it shows we're doing something right.
As is my want, bring a slightly negative tone to it and talk about one player who is slightly unlucky, perhaps not to be part of the squad. We mentioned Belcher, but I think another one is Ben Thomas. We talked about him last week as a possible. I think having been name checked as a versatile player that can play 10, he hasn't had much of a look in at 10. And then you look at the type of 12 that Gatland's gone with. Okay, Nick Tompkins defensively is solid, but he's not, and he's also not a crash ball 12. Neither is Owen Watkin, really. Both are defensively solid players first and foremost, with a slight added playmaker element. So we saw Tompkins show that brilliantly during the World Cup. But do you think Ben can count himself unlucky not to be part of the squad, or do you think it's a case of just maybe not this one, but maybe one in the future?
That's kind of what I'm hoping it is. But also, I do think because Gatland very much name checked him at 10, I think it's because he hasn't seen enough of him at 10 to warrant that bit where he's gone for the versatility. If you look at the 3 10s who are in the squad, you've got, you obviously got Costello, who's going to be our number one choice out now 10. Apparently can play 12. Actually, to be fair, he's got the defensive game for it. I'm not sure I'd want him as my crash ball. But then when you've got a George North or a Mason Grady outside you, doesn't matter. You've got a crash ball option. And then Johan Lloyd and Kai Evans are, these fullback 10s. So you've got these versatile players. So I think because Gatland wants to keep these squads a bit smaller than they have been in the past, and I think part of the pro rugby agreement is to try and push these squads as small as feasibly possible, so that more players are available for the regions. So hopefully, maybe for the summer, so he'll get that. But yeah, I think it's just because he's not been playing. I don't know if there's anything in it that because he's not been picked for he wasn't picked for the Scarlets games because they went, oh, it's a Big 12, and he wasn't picked against, to be at 12 for the Quins game. Is that Gatland in his head saying, well, maybe he's not able to cope with the physicality of that? I think that's bollocks. But is that the sort of picture that's been painted for Gatland? Because I don't know how much he actually watches of all the games, or how much he gets clipped up and then says, right, what's so and so strengths and weaknesses? Well, he was really good against Dragons, but he didn't play against this, or he played fullback, which is not where Gatland wants him playing. He wants him playing as 10 and 12. But and I do think it's a bit of a shame because I do feel like other players, Cardiff players, I feel got the nod, even though Cardiff haven't really won that many games. They've been playing because they've been playing the Champions Cup. I feel like for like the Morgan Morse Mackenzie Martin debate, they've both been playing very well, but Mackenzie Martin's been doing it against Harlequins and Toulouse, and Morgan Morse did it against against Perpignan and play teams like that. I don't know if that seems to be some of the stuff I've seen out there, but I do think he's quite unlucky. Other than that, I don't think too many can be disappointed. I mean, I know Rhys Caray's a name that always gets thrown up, particularly when you have a look at Kemsley Mathias coming to the squad, who's had a bit of a rough time with it this season. But I think Gatland's just sort of decided he's not interest in that. And with Carey going to Sarries, maybe he thought, well, there's no point getting in if he's going to become ineligible.
I can understand the carry thing if it doesn't pan out. It's obviously sad for carry and everything, but it's Gatland's prerogative if he doesn't think he's worked hard enough for it, and that's that. The Ben Thomas thing, I suppose, hands quite nicely into what we have to talk about. When you mentioned in the first 30 seconds of the pod, which was the result from last weekend, because
Yeah.
we had an interesting chat last week about who we thought was going to be the 12. I said, and this isn't by any chance me going, I'm right and you're wrong, but I thought it would be Hollow because of the size thing, and it seems to be a trend that we've seen against Scarlet, seen against Harlequins, that Sherritt tends to pick Hollow for his size against Esterhazen. But it was an area that was exploited by Harlequins over the weekend, wasn't it? And they did take advantage a number of times of that 12-13 channel, didn't they?
Yeah, I think as well, because Harlequins, although Esterhazen is a big guy and he can do that crash stuff, it's probably one of the less used parts of his game, actually. Because he's
Mm.
such a good distributor and he's so quick that he can
Mm.
run around. He ends up, he's on the wing more often, making meters there. So actually, then you end up slowing. So I feel like, having a sort of a younger player in Ben Thomas actually that gives you that speed in the midfield and the athleticism. Remember how was coming back from, some really tough injuries. And, I hope he doesn't take, because I know he does listen pod and, great because he's fun. I love him to bits. I hope it's not taken this wrong way, but I don't think he's fully up to speed, or certainly not where he was yet. So I think he, probably needs a few more games again because bless him, he's had a couple of these injuries now, and each one does take a little bit longer to get through.
Mm.
I've dislocated when he once, and it creaks in the winter. Like that's how crap a knee joint is. But I think maybe Ben Thomas actually probably was a better choice there. I think as well we missed out by not having like Josh Adams because he's out with some knee injuries by the sound of it. And,
Yeah.
someone from like the wing who could probably take up a little bit more of defensive role that again helps shore it up. But I mean the whole team got torn up. I mean you've got to say hands down Harlequins were unbelievable.
Oh yeah.
They are such a good side, and when they're on it, they're on it.
Yeah, and definitely, I talk about being right on one thing, I was wrong on the other, which was the prediction. I think I said I was quite confident that Cardiff would win, and yeah, look, first half I thought, well, it is there's two different halves in it. In that Harlequins got stronger and stronger. Marcus Smith was superb. I know I was sort of sounded almost disparaging of him last week, talking about it. There's this kid to Marcus Smith, but I think everyone's fed up of the hullabaloo around him, but he is a very good rugby player. And then when you've got players around him like Tyrone Green, like Danny Kay, when you've got that back row was superb on the weekend, I thought. Chisholm,
Mm.
Will Evans, Don Brandt, or Don Barber, as he was being called by David James on Radio Wales commentary. But I really enjoyed their performances. I thought they were superb in the back row. And then you add in Oscar Beard, has been a
Mm.
find and a half this
And
season.
congratulations to his England call up as well, actually,
Yeah, fully
because
deserved.
the way he's been playing, yeah, unbelievable. Also ex Cardiff man Emmanuel Faber both are going to the England squad. So that's
Yes.
two excellent Cardiff wingers who we've just said, oh, we don't need them. They can go, they can go to NFL or England. They're short of money in players.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the tweets sent to the English rugby Twitter, because there seems to be one every time there's a Welsh saying that's the England B side. So waiting for the Welsh B side to be mentioned. But let's move on from that, because but the Harlequins were superb. So many great tries, so many great moments. I thought Tyrant Green, when he scored, I thought fully deserved. For me, he was possibly man of the match, even though I know Danny Kay won it in the end, and Marcus was superb
That
about
was a
that.
very narrative one. I think it's one of my issues with TNT Sports. I think they are very narrative driven on their of their play in the matches.
Yeah, so Danny Keir himself didn't think he deserved man of the match on that one. And, by the second half, the forwards were getting such go forward for them, weren't they? Every single carry seemed to be going forward, and it seemed to be Well, Dylan Lewis's try, for instance, seemed to be
That was so
inevitable.
painful.
Yeah.
I mean, well done, Dylan, but you bastard.
Expected, there's part of me when I was watching it expecting to go full football like apology celebration, and I was a bit disappointed when he didn't like say I'm not celebrating and all that sort of thing. But it's not really a thing in rugby, is it?
I still wanted him to just give it the biggins, but yeah. And then he won a scrum penalty, and it was just like, and he did win the scrum penalty and got the try, and and I was talking with Jamie on the wrap, and he just went, if it was going to be anyone, it was going to be Dylan.
Mm.
Like if it'd been a tight game and Jared Evans was fit, he'd have scored the winning penalty because it was just one of those, he just had one of those vibes about it. I mean, it was never that close. I mean, I do feel the win got knocked out of ourselves, and that after that, that right in the death of the first half, that try, and I think and then they got a really quick one straight after. And I know I make a rule of not having to go at the officials, but how the hell can you not see 6'9" Ern Hurts coming from the side of a fucking mall in front of you?
That's not the one that's going to frustrated with me. I
Yeah,
must be
I know
honest.
everyone's on about the try saving tackle. I mean, they did ruin a perfectly good try saving tackle, in my opinion, because Mason Grady came from the opposite wing to make that.
It's
But for me, that was just so obviously egregious, and you just went, and it would have made. I don't think it'd have made any difference to the game whatsoever. But it was just that. But it's so obvious. Like the other one was a millimeters. I can't be one of those people who says, "Oh, if it's in doubt, just award the try," and then be moaning. I mean, it was a wonderful tackle from Mason Grady. It just wasn't quite enough in the end. But yeah,
I think I'm most frustrated about that because I live said that's not a try because the reaction of the player, the way the ball came out, I just thought, oh, I don't think he scored. And then the ref had given it, and once the ref gives that, it is very difficult to overturn because it is millimeters, it is uncertain. I think Joy Neville got talked into it a little bit. I really do. I think there was an angle which looked like he'd scored, and there was an angle where he looked like he hadn't scored. I'm still convinced he hadn't. Oscar Bid's lack of celebration suggested to me he hadn't as well. But anyway, I did feel that was a sucker punch for Cardiff because first half, apart from that, the start of the game, brilliant. Thomas Young back to his best, clean heels Thomas or whatever you want to call him. Definitely not clean heels Thomas because that is horrendous. But he was.
I mean, that's worse. That's worse than your Thomas the 10 engine, mate.
Thomas the Tank Engine was good, and it was. But but yeah, I thought he was brilliant. The first couple of minutes, the second try, especially the offloads that lead up to it with Thomas Williams, that is, and Harry Millard in the lead up, and then it didn't seem. It just seemed like Cardiff couldn't wrestle back momentum from that point, didn't it? And then it was wave after wave after wave. And the sucker punch of the Oscar Beard try, having held out Quins for a good 5-10 minutes up until that point, was a bit frustrating. And then, yeah, second half was all one way. Is it as simple as saying the Beard try was a turning point? Or was that just a bit short sighted to say?
There are a couple of things. So for me, I think it was it's just they say championships minutes by scoring like the last minutes of the first half and first minutes of the second half, you set a tone. And I do think it's it nags on you and it goes in, and I think it led to some things being not so quick. One thing Jamie pointed out from on the rap we were recording last night, it does happen with Cardiff. They seem to go all guns blazing, and like in the first 20 minutes. So unless we can put a game to bed in like the first half hour, other than that Stormers game, we can't seem to wrestle it back. So I don't know if that's a fitness thing. Because obviously, what was the name? Was it Paul Bevan? Tristan Bevan, this S&C coach who Di Young brought in, and I think he went with Di.
And Tristan Bevan, yeah.
And and they were gearing them up so that they were playing that high tempo. And I don't know if now they're not getting the S&C's training to be this high tempo, or if it's just because it's younger players, or if it's just because it's been a hell of a long that's a hell of a long block of games.
I think the young players not seeing, and not just young players but inexperienced players.
Yeah,
Tina
I
is at a
don't
young,
think that does help.
but he's an inexperienced player at this level, and I think that has been evident in a couple of games. I don't think he had his best game on the weekend. So I'm not, and that's not me digging him out. There was a number of players who didn't have their best game. That's for certain. You lose by that margin. Obviously, the number of players haven't had their best games, but sometimes I think there's been, we've mentioned it. There's a number of games this season that Cardiff should have seen out, and should have seen out in the opening 40 minutes, and not taken all their chances in the opening 40 minutes. I think the game on the weekend was another case of it. You look at certain moments, Thomas Williams breaking free and not taking advantage. There's certain other moments that I thought, there's a chance there. Not that Harlequins didn't squander moments. I don't think I've ever been so frustrated at an opposition player as the Marcus Smith break from underneath his own sticks and then Will Evans kicks the ball away. Even as a Cardiff fan, I was raging at that because that could have been try of the century. But yeah, it just seems to be a thing of not taking their opportunities to the extent they should in the first half, and then perhaps not having as much of a game management thing or be able to wrestle things away from opposition in the second half. There's going to be work-ons. It's a young team, it's an inexperienced team, but as we've mentioned, they are similar themes, aren't they?
Yeah. As well, I think losing Carwyn it quite early on as well. That seemed to be that seemed to be quite a momentum wrestler as well. Basically because one, you had to stop the game from come off, and then he's almost a talisman of for the Cardiff attack. Even when he's not necessarily involved, it's because the energy he brings on the pitch, and then you bring in Ben Thomas. We've always discussed. Yes, he can play fullback, but we all pretty much see him as a 12. And then that means then Halaholu and Lilo are probably playing longer than, Ferret's probably wanting to take one of them off after 50, 60 minutes. You can't do that, then that changes things there. It's shit. I mean, plenty of players had great games. I thought Thomas Young on his first game back, excellent. He took his brace well. Probably didn't get the reward over the ball that he'd wanted. I think he gave away a penalty, which I think a little bit harsh.
Yeah, I agree. I know which one you're on about. Yeah, that was that.
But again, this is going back to my thing of saying, referees are more likely to reward an attack and punish the defense, because we've all wanted these faster, open, flowing games. So that's how the breakdown interpretation's got to go. Yeah, it's shame. I mean, I said in the second half the scrum got pummeled. It's no other way to say it, but you're gonna have those days. I feel like it's one of those games they're probably not going to dwell too much on.
No, and that's something they have to do, especially looking ahead, not just for the rest of the UR season, but the Champions Cup, because despite being bottom of Champions Cup Pool 2 on just 2 points, there is still an opportunity because of this format of Cardiff reaching the round of 16 of both the Champions Cup or the Challenge Cup. And okay, what's the saying? All paths lead to Rome. All paths go through Racing. Basically, win at all costs. However many cliches you want to stick in this sentence, but it is a big game this weekend. And if they beat Racing, I think this is my understanding of the permutations. So Ulster are away at Harlequins. Ulster are on 5 points. Cardiff on 2. Racing on 3. If Cardiff beat Racing and Ulster fail to beat Harlequins, then Cardiff will. And Ulster lose the Harlequins, Cardiff will qualify for the Champions Cup. Is that correct?
There will be some bonus, but if Ulster get 2 bonus points, then that'll put us. We'll be on 6. We might be on 6, and they'll be on 7. If we get 5, then it goes into points difference. I think because normally the next tiebreaker is who won out of the two of you, but we obviously didn't play each other because we're both URCs. And we won the same number of games.
The points difference isn't exactly in Cardiff's favour, is it? There's a minus 60.
It depends how bad. Yeah, it depends how badly they lose, but it depends how well we. If we did beat Racing, we claw some of that back, and Ulster probably didn't take as bad a battering as to lose. But I mean, if Quins play like they did today, I think that actually they could probably do the same to Ulster as good as they've been.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, There's that. If not, we're probably in the Champions. Like, if we win, we're minimum Challenge Cup.
Yeah. Which
Um,
I think, considering that group, which is a horrible group,
yeah.
isn't a bad achievement, to be honest.
I mean, at the start of the season, we said I think a good result for us in Europe this year would be if we made the Challenge Cup, because we
Yeah.
didn't finish last, which is exactly
Yeah.
where everyone expects us to. I mean, I don't want to throw the budgets thing in again, but if you look at the teams we're up against, I mean, I know you've got the salary cap in England, but if you look at how much money is going behind those teams, it's a lot more. And actually, although the WRU said they set the £5 million threshold to rival England, it's like, yeah, but you're not taking into account marquee players, the England player rebate, and the academies rebate. So actually, their cap's actually probably close to 7 million, and then Toulouse are running at like 10 million plus. They was at one point they had four of the Six Nations international fullbacks.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was, there was three because you got Capawatso, Ramos, and Kinghorn. Like
Yeah, because
that's ridiculous.
they could afford to let Jalibert go and Colby
Yeah,
go last season, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's just mad. But
Bonkers.
yeah, I mean, let's be fair. We were never going to do anything great against Toulouse because just look at how they played everyone else. I think, yeah, but at the same time, I'm also ready for Europe to be over.
Yeah. I don't know, I still think this Racing side are beatable. Yeah, let's talk about it. They have lost 3 out of 3. Okay. There have been mitigating circumstances around that, which is they lost in the last minute to Harlequins. They were unlucky against Bath. If anyone's seen the highlight of that game against Bath, the amount of try-saving tackles that Finn Russell made, let alone the rest of the Bath team made on Racing players, is unbelievable. But I just, I, I personally would like to see Cardiff continue in Europe. I know you feel a bit differently about it, but I just, even if it's the Challenge Cup, I think it brings in crowds. It brings in a different atmosphere. It brings in just a lot. The revenue isn't going to be a bad thing, especially if they get an opportunity to play at home. I know that's unlikely with the situation, but I just feel that it would be a great opportunity for Cardiff to continue in Europe this season, especially when we don't know how often they're going to have good runs in Europe, or Welsh teams in total are going to have good runs in Europe. So um, I think Racing are beatable, but it is going to be one hell of a challenge. And Racing aren't going to focus on it. Let's be honest; their minds are going to be on something else. But we'll see. We'll see what team they put out.
Thing is, if it was at home, if it was our home game, I'd be leaning more towards agreeing.
Mm,
But it is in the Disco Dome,
yeah.
and freezing. I'm saying that it's going to be Saturday afternoon, which is a really weird French kickoff time. Like, if you're demanding to have the home game over a Welsh, so don't have the 3 o'clock kickoff slot. But you've still got so much quality in there. You got Fiku, Woki, Khaleesi, Rollins. It's Max
No.
Spring, which is a name that makes me giggle uncontrollably if I haven't like mentally prepared myself to say it beforehand. The new latest iteration of TNT Sports is Rugby Jesus before he signed Harry Arundel. There's a lot of talent there. I mean, we definitely could win, but I think everything would have to go right. And if you look at some of the players we've got unavailable, so this is to Simon Thomas, who posted yesterday. So Josh Adams out with knees. Belcher's done his shoulder, so he's not available. Cam Winnett's cracked his jaw on the Cam Winnett thing, so it's very unlikely we'll see him in the Six Nations till sort of midway through. So I think Gatlin said he's good, definitely missed the first 2 games. But the fact he's been put into squad says to me that he's going to try and give him some game time. So then I think, Shane Lewis Hughes as well, still injured. I mean, I'm not saying the cupboard's bare, but it's going to be interesting because we will have Evan Lloyd and Evan Daniels. They probably Daniel start, Lloyd on the bench.
Yeah.
And then we'll see what's. I don't know because I think Domachowski took a bit of a knock as well, but I just assumed that was just Shout's usual tactical swap with the prop changeover.
It's a winner takes all clash, and I
Yeah,
think that's when you know you can throw caution to the wind. If Cardiff get a great win out in Racing, that's a brilliant result. Out in Racing, out in Paris, it's a great result, and I think likewise Racing will see it as a bit of a blowout. So I think again we're talking about good games because all the games in this pool have been particularly good. You know that
yeah,
all the teams are known for wanting to throw the ball around and play attacking rugby, which does seem to be the new common denominator with sides in general, but especially these the six teams that are in this pool. So I think it'll be an exciting game. I it is an uphill task, but I don't think it's an insurmountable task, which it would have been had we been going to lose. I think as
yeah,
the last game. I think it's a game which there's a possibility there, which I know it's the hope that kills you, but there's a possibility there of a good result, and hopefully Cardiff can manage to pull one out of the bag. Do you want to go to some listener questions before we move on to some of the other stuff that's going on?
sure. Yeah, if you got anything else, I said most of them. I said there's a lot around revolving around the Wales squad and who do we, how do we realistically think we're going to sign people?
Yeah, so that was one given by Gareth McGilvery. Can the club realistically bring in players in the summer, and if so, who is on the radar? Thinking in particular of halfbacks, second row, and maybe hooker. Harley, do you want to start that one?
Um, I'd say halfbacks. I'd say, I mean, certainly with scrum half, I think we'll probably be all right, and I think they'll try and make do with Ellis Bevan, Jamie Hill, and then an academy lad as the third option using two. They may be bringing up a replacement. I'm not convinced. I mean, Thomas is going to free up some money. I think, in all likelihood, we're probably going to lose Adams and Falato as well. So I don't know how much headroom that gives me, obviously, because we're losing another £700,000 from the cap. But maybe the new investors will say, well, we'll give you this much to keep a big name. Yeah, because we are going to be allowed a marquee signing. Who won't count. I think halfbacks probably we either need to decide, are we going to keep Arwell Robson, because he's not really played for us. He's played a bit for the Rags and something. If we're serious about keeping him in the squad, he needs to start getting some game time, I think, for me. And then if not, then yeah, maybe you look to bring someone in. I don't know who. For me, I'd say probably another second row because I think Tamani's contract's out as well. So it'd be nice to get someone to show up there. I think hookers I'd say the three hookers we're using at the moment, I think are more than doing their job. You probably look maybe another loose head because we're good. If we lose in carry, and again, I have no names about that. And maybe they can look at maybe talk to Bennett and Zebra, see if they've got any players who are shorter game time with their like 60, 70 man squads. Either that or maybe, just comb the top 10 in Georgia or something like that, or, we'll have another little dip into the Curry Cup.
Hmm.
See if they got
I
any diamonds in rough.
Yeah, I agree on hookers and loose heads. I think loose heads is one. Obviously, if Carey moves and that situation, well, it's almost a when Carey moves, really, isn't it? It seems almost nigh on. But that situation, I think, is one that you're going to need to get another replacement in. I know Reece Barrett's been playing well as well, but that's probably another conversation to have. Second row is. Yeah, it'd be nice to get another body in there, wouldn't it? Because
Yeah,
Turnbull's not getting any younger, and I don't mean that disparagingly, but obviously he's had his injury troubles recently and is still working his way back to fitness this season, and maybe he'll be great next season. But and then again, you've got to mention Shane Hughes, who did such a good job
yeah,
at the start of the season, so perhaps they see him as a long-term option there. But the impression I got from Shane Hughes was that he saw it as a short-term fix and was hoping it was going to be a short-term fix because he sees himself as a six. But um, we'll see how that pans out. The scrum half thing, I think there's a market there. I think there's a look. The obvious one to look at is one of the Scarlets three: Archie Hughes, Kieran Hardy, Gareth Davis. Whether you can tempt one of them away to be right, you're going to be first choice, but we've mentioned it several times on the pod how well Ellis Bevan has played this season, and I wouldn't want to turn to him and say, "Look, you're going to be second choice again," because he's been brilliant. And honestly, the way, and I don't mean this too harshly, but I don't see anything in the way that um, Hardy's performed particularly this season that I would say, oh, he'd be first choice definitely above Ellis Bevan. I don't think that's definitely the case. I don't think, Gareth internationally has shown his class, but maybe not had the best of seasons domestically. And Archie Hughes is yet to set the world alight in domestic, although he did have a very good game on the weekend. So it's one of those situations where I would be very happy to say, okay, Ellis Bevan is starting 9 for next season. That wouldn't bother me at all. And then at 10, I am going to say I'd like to see someone else bring in just purely because I am a little bit worried. I am a little bit worried about the situation where you've got 60 minutes of Tinas de Beer, and then maybe he has a 5-minute spell where it's not going right for him, which happens with all fly halves, and there isn't an option to replace. And I understand why he's trying to put his faith in Tinas and giving him that experience, but there should be another option to replace him, whether that be Ben Thomas or whether that be a 10. That is another option. So I would be looking at a 10, perhaps. Names wise, I couldn't really pick one out of a hat, but I'm trying to think of someone off the top of my head that I'd really like the look of, and I'm struggling. Tiff Eden I'd really like, but I don't know if that's a possibility.
I
But
don't know if we can go up against the financial clout of Zebra. So
yeah.
I said for me, I feel like we've got names signed up. I think we've either got to say like, no, it's not what we want, and then look to bring someone in, or we need to start actually seeing them, because obviously Sherritt will see these guys in training, because obviously you've got Al Robson, Ben Thomas as an option, and then it's Harry Wild, who by all accounts has been playing well for the Rags, but
Everyone's a
again,
big
so
fan
quiet.
of him. Sorry, everyone's a big fan of him, thinks he's got a bright future, but like you say, we haven't seen him yet.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it's a really hard one with halfbacks, because I feel like we haven't seen enough of the ones we've got, other than Tina. So I imagine we'll be, I'd quite like to keep him for a couple of years at least until we've got our own thing set up. Probably a centre, I'd say, either that or we need to start playing Mason and Millard in the centres and not just use them as wings, because we've just had such a crap time with injuries in the wings.
Yeah.
I think it'd be an interesting one what happens with Beetham going forward.
Yes, very. I agree with that one.
Whether he does convert to 12 or something, full time or whatever, it's he's just going to have to accept being, we do need to have someone as the number 2 in these positions, because that's where I think we've been failing. As soon as we've lost the first choice one, then the second choice is a bit of an issue. So yeah, I think for me, I'd like an extra body in the second row as my total priority, and then maybe a centre. And then I think the rest of the positions for round. I think Hook is probably is one of the better ones in depth. Tight end, I think we're probably all right. At least in numbers, maybe not necessarily. It'd be nice to have the likes of an Arhead back, but we can't really afford to sign someone at that level.
Yeah. I was just wondering, any of the other questions you wanted to answer? I think we answered the one a bit about the youngsters being selected and whether we should be concerned, because I think I think we both agree that it's a real positive for the youngsters, and it shows how good the pathway is working. There is a question on Thomas Young, and if we were in his shoes, would you look to move out of Wales or even look for linebacker in NFL, which I suggest might be a bit more tongue-in-cheek after the LRZ news. But yeah, I think that's maybe born out of the frustration of being in Thomas Young's shoes and being overlooked last season for international call-up. And if I was in his shoes, would I be tempted if a big offer comes on the table? Yes. If considering he probably came back to Wales for the pull of the Wales shirt as one of his big factors, along with obviously his dad being the coach, etc., etc. But I he has played a lot of good rugby at Cardiff, and I wouldn't want to see him leave at all. So my main thing would be to say that this is a player who Gatlin has looked at in the past, did give game time to, did give opportunities to, is something a bit different. I don't think his time or opportunities in a Wales shirt are over by any stretch of the imagination. So I'd like him to see him stay. And I'd like to see him stay for a Cardiff perspective, let alone anything with Wales concerned, because he is such a different athlete that he offers something completely different to the other sevens. You know, that's what excites me about it.
You know, he's a different seven, and pretty much as soon as he's fit, he gets thrown straight in because he does make our game work. Oh, sorry. Well, yeah. So he does make everything. You know, like those 2 tries he scored. You know, he didn't just come up pop on the end. You know, he had a key role in making it because he's so, you know, because he's got the speed, he's athletic. You know, and he's fantastic over the ball. Right, he doesn't always get the turnover, but he will at least slow the ball down. And yeah, I mean, do you know what? Selfishly, I'm kind of glad Gatlin's not picking him because it means we've got him for the Connacht game. You know, and I want to keep that. Yeah, so I think he's desperately unlucky, but again, as we said, we've gone for younger. If you look at the two out and out sevens, again, I'm not convinced sevens Basham's best position. You know, like Reffel and Basham, you know, that's it. He's got 2 of them. He's got 2 people he's looking at as probably 6s and 2 people he's looking at 8s as 8s. You know, I mean, and he is tending towards the younger ends, whereas Thomas Young's in his 30s now. So I don't know if that's counting against him. Also, remember, he has missed most of this season.
Yeah.
You know, and I think more as a precaution, they took him off quite early on in the Quins game as well. You know, which I'm hoping is just more precaution for injury and not tactical or anything, because I think he was actually one of our better players. But yes, I still don't know what else to say there.
No, I fully agree. Let's look at Indigo Prem then, because it was a busy weekend. Some big results. Kamal and Quins beating Pontypool. I did make a joke on the Welsh podcast whether Kamal and Quins can reach the top 4. I am joking. They probably can't, but they are on a good roll, and it's good to see. From a Cardiff perspective, Merthyr earns a good victory, getting over the 50-point mark. Well, exactly 50 points against Bridgend at home. Pontypridd turned around their recent losses with a 48-10 victory over Neath. The Rags weren't playing on the weekend, but this weekend they will be playing. They are away at Neath, who obviously have turned things around before that Pontypridd result, whereas Pontypridd are away at Bridgend, that old Celtic Warriors derby. And Merthyr away at Pontypool, who Pontypool, after a brilliant start to the season, are starting to slip a bit down the table. You know, they are now in 5th. They're just a point behind the Rags in 4th, but it's a good opportunity for Merthyr. If they've got a game in hand over Pontypool, if they can win that game, and then, well, hopefully in the future they'll leapfrog Pontypool and get closer into that competition for 4th spot. Pontypridd, likewise, they need a couple of wins as well to get ahead of Pontypool. So that it's a big game, I think, that one, particularly Merthyr away at Pontypool this weekend. The other news, obviously, is Gwalior Lightning. They lost on the weekend, sadly, which is their first loss of the campaign. But you know, it has been a good campaign for them so far. Everyone was expecting Brython Thunder to be the Welsh team that were going to go so well, but it has been Gwalior so far that have been performing well, head and shoulders above Brython Thunder, who are still yet to have a victory. The way it sits at the moment, Gwalior are 2nd behind the Wolfhounds of Ireland, with Edinburgh 3rd, Clovers, Brython Thunder, and Glasgow the remaining teams. There's no game this weekend, but next weekend at the Cardiff Arms Park at 1:30 will be Gwalior Lightning at home to Edinburgh, which we'll signpost next week, I'm sure. But yeah, hopefully those girls continue to perform well. And you know, that's another bit of news that we should mention is obviously the Lions Tour, the announcement of a women's Lions Tour in, I think it's 2027. I'm right to say, isn't it? and how great a news that has been. That's been fair to say, a long time coming, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mean, I have seen some quite valid criticism of it, but it's quite nice to have, this one thing where I actually like the women's games emulating men's. They're starting off with New Zealand 2027, which makes sense. Black Ferns, you know, World Cup champions. I mean, there is a little bit of thing, is it a bit fair because England are so far ahead of the other three? Well,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, we've had Lions tours where it's been dominated by one nation before, and it's not to say that there aren't players who aren't good enough to compete. Like, if you saw Jazz Joyce in an England backline, she wouldn't look out of place. If you saw, uh,
Give me
oh no,
position. Alicia Butchers.
no, I was thinking of for Nicola Friday. If you saw Nicola Friday in the Red Roses pack, she looked great.
Sam Monaghan would be a name
Yeah,
I'm.
Sam Rona Lloyd. She would look. She wouldn't look out of place. There are these players. Yes, it's
Yeah.
probably going to be England dominated, but you can't say there aren't players good enough to be up with that. And I believe the talk is that they're going to be a lot looser. And it's not going to be as a rigid same three on rotation. So it looks like it's going to be so it's going to be New Zealand, then they're going to try France, then they're going to try like Canada and USA. So they're looking at who are the powers in the women's game. Not just going. I know the Wallaroos and the Springbok women are rapidly improving, but they're not saying right because the men do this, we're going to do the same. They're saying like who are the big teams. So that'll be quite exciting, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I do see the issue with it. I do see that. There's then a question of, do you create a mandatory level that you have to have X amount of players per team, and does that then devalue the Lions as a whole and the value of playing for the Lions? I can understand all those debates, and I assume they'll be discussed, but I I do think it's a really positive thing to bring in. There needed to be another tournament, so whether it be a Lions, whether it be a Celtic challenge, three Celtic sides coming together and communicating. But obviously, how do you do that without England, who would want to be involved every 4 years? So I'm glad to see there is this coming in. Yeah, what do you do about the English dominance? I don't know exactly, but hopefully there'll be enough.
I
And
mean,
as
the
you
answer to
mentioned,
that's simple. It's
it's
the other
improved
unions
the
pull
other
their finger out.
countries. Yeah, yeah.
It's as I said, there are players who would be good. Like I don't think they would just take the Red Roses. I think there are plenty of players who they would. So I mean, and if you're going to say, oh, you need to have so many from each nation in this, well, why don't you have it in the men's one when Scotland only get one player? It's
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's plenty of players, whether it be Cecilia to either of the hookers, Kelsey or Caris. Yeah, we mentioned Alicia Butchers. I'll keep mentioning Alicia Butchers because I really enjoy watching her as a rugby player.
yeah, her and Alcal, just
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, exactly. So hopefully we see plenty of Welsh players in that side in just over 3 years' time. You wanted to mention quickly before we close about under-18s as well.
Yeah, just today the Cardiff under-18s girls they beat Ospreys under-18s 24-18, I think. So I've had the score in my head and I've just lost it. Hopefully going to do a little bit more in depth of the under-18s campaigns as a whole because it sort of slipped under the radar, and we're a bit pushed for time tonight because we've got to vacate the airways for Ospreys to record. Although fuck am I say?
Is that our final remark?
Yeah.
And on that note,
Yeah, and also, so I think, if we can delve into a little bit more, then talk about the under-18 boys as well, who I think are also have been going quite well with their games. I said I just haven't got the results off the top of my head because I'm woefully unprepared for these things sometimes. So I think unless there's anything else to discuss. Just a friendly reminder to please like, subscribe, and send us any feedback you want. Follow us on Twitter at Cardiff_Central. If we can get 4 more followers, if we can get 5 more followers on Facebook, we will double. So feel free if you're just more than that. Yeah, you can also we'll also be tagged in on things. So there's no point going our individual handles. Mine's mostly just retweeting the pod anyway. So other than that, I just want to say thank you, Carwyn, for joining and sort of taking the lead tonight.
My pleasure. Cheers, mate.
So thank you all for listening. Good night.
Yeah.